Blood trickled down Beatrice Matthews' pale arm as she clenched her fists, fingernails digging into her palms. The iron shackles bit into her wrists as she stood trembling on the auction block, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. The Montana Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman alone, and now she was being sold like cattle to the highest bidder. $500 for this fine specimen, bellowed the auctioneer, a portly man with tobacco-stained teeth. Young, strong, can cook and clean. Perfect for any man's home or establishment. Beatrice wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but there was nowhere to go. 3 weeks ago, she'd been the daughter of a respected Boston merchant. Now, after her father's sudden death and the discovery that he'd been deeply in debt, the creditors had taken everything. Her father's business partner had promised to help her only to drug her tea and sell her to traders heading west. The crowd of rough-looking men shouted numbers, their eyes raking over her body with undisguised hunger. Beatrice closed her eyes, unable to bear their stares. Her once fine blue dress was torn and filthy from the long journey in the back of a wagon. Her blonde hair hung in tangled waves down her back. "700, called a man with a scarred face and missing teeth. 800, countered another, his breath reeking of whiskey even from several feet away. $1,000, said a quiet, firm voice from the back of the crowd. The bidding stopped abruptly. The crowd parted to reveal a tall man in a worn leather duster and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features. Dust covered his boots and trousers, suggesting he'd ridden hard to get here. Sold to the gentleman in the back. The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that made Beatrice flinch. She was yanked down from the platform, still sobbing, and pushed toward the stranger who had purchased her. As she stumbled forward, she caught sight of his face weathered by sun and wind, with piercing blue eyes that regarded her steadily. A neatly trimmed beard covered his jawline, and a small scar bisected his left eyebrow. He approached and removed his hat, revealing dark blonde hair streaked with gold from the sun. "Don't cry," he said softly so only she could hear. "You're safe now." The handler thrust her papers at the stranger. "She's all yours, mister, no refunds." The man didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he draped his coat around Beatrice's shoulders and gently guided her away from the crowd toward a tall chestnut horse waiting nearby. "My name is Fletcher Reed," he said as they walked. "I'm taking you to my ranch. You'll be safe there until we can figure out what to do." Beatrice looked up at him, confusion and fear warring in her expression. What are you going to do with me?" Fletcher's expression softened. "Nothing you don't want. I saw what was happening and couldn't stand by." He paused, then added, "I have a sister back east. I'd hope someone would do the same for her if she were in trouble." As he helped her onto his horse, Beatrice wondered if she could trust this stranger's words. But as they rode away from the squalid mining town where she'd nearly lost everything, including her freedom, she felt the first stirrings of hope she'd experienced in weeks. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, the vast Montana landscape stretching endlessly around them. Golden prairie grass rippled in the wind like an ocean, and distant mountains loomed purple against the horizon. Despite her exhaustion, Beatrice couldn't help but notice the wild beauty of this untamed country. "It's about another hour to my ranch," Fletcher said, breaking the silence. "Are you all right to continue or do you need to rest?" His consideration surprised her. "I can continue," she replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "There's water in the canteen if you're thirsty," he offered. Beatrice took a small sip, then another. The cool water was a blessing to her parched throat. "Thank you, Mr. Reid." "Fletcher," he corrected gently. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "By me, I mean." He was quiet for a moment, his arms steady around her as he held the reins. No person should be bought or sold. What they were doing was wrong, even if they dressed it up as an indentured service auction. But you spent $1,000, she protested. Money comes and goes, he said simply. Some things matter more. They crested a small rise and Beatrice gasped at the view below. A neat ranch house sat in a small valley, surrounded by several outbuildings. A creek wound its way through rich pastureland where cattle grazed. It looked like a painting of the promised land. "Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch," Fletcher said, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair. "That's Mrs. Abigail Parker," Fletcher explained. "My housekeeper. She'll help get you settled." The woman hurried toward them as Fletcher helped Beatrice dismount. Her legs buckled after the long ride, and he caught her gently by the elbows. "Fletcher Reed, what in heaven's name?" Mrs. Parker began, then stopped abruptly when she saw Beatrice's condition. Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside right away." Within moments, Beatrice found herself seated at a sturdy kitchen table while Mrs. Parker fussed around her, setting out bread, cold meat, and a cup of hot tea. "Eat, child," the older woman encouraged. "You look half-starved." Fletcher leaned against the doorframe, watching with concern. "Mrs. Parker, this is Miss Beatrice," she supplied, realizing he didn't even know her name. "Beatrice Matthews. Miss Matthews needs clothes, a hot bath, and a place to rest," Fletcher continued. "Can you see to it?" "Of course," Mrs. Parker replied. "I'll prepare the guest room." "I'll be in the barn if you need me," he said, donning his hat again. After he left, Mrs. Parker sat across from Beatrice, her kind eyes assessing. "He bought you from one of those awful auctions, didn't he?" Beatrice nodded, tears threatening again. "It's not the first time," the housekeeper said with a sigh. "2 years ago it was a young man being sold to the mines. Before that, a Chinese girl. Fletcher can't abide injustice. What happens to them, the people he purchases? He helps them get where they want to go, or they stay and work here if they choose. Fair wages, decent treatment." Mrs. Parker patted Beatrice's hand. "You're truly safe here, dear." After a hot bath in a copper tub behind a screen in the kitchen, Beatrice felt almost human again. Mrs. Parker had found her a simple but clean dress that was only slightly too large, and had brushed out her tangled hair until it shone. "There," the housekeeper said with satisfaction. "You'll feel better after a good night's sleep. Tomorrow we can talk about what you'd like to do next." The guest room was small but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains that fluttered in the evening breeze. For the first time in weeks, Beatrice slept without fear. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes and made her way to the kitchen. Fletcher was already there, drinking coffee at the table while Mrs. Parker cooked. He stood when Beatrice entered, a gesture of gentlemanly respect that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Good morning, Miss Matthews. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Reed." "Fletcher," he reminded her with a small smile. Mrs. Parker placed a plate of food before Beatrice. "Eat up, dear. Nothing solves problems like a full stomach." After breakfast, Fletcher invited Beatrice to join him on the porch. They sat in rocking chairs, looking out over the ranch as it came to life in the morning light. 2 ranch hands were already at work in the corral, training a spirited young horse. "I thought we should discuss your situation," Fletcher said. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, but I imagine you have family somewhere who are worried about you." Beatrice shook her head sadly. "My father was my only family. He died 3 weeks ago. His business partner, Mr. Hargrove, said he would help me, but—" She faltered, the betrayal still fresh and painful. "But he's the one who sent you west," Fletcher finished grimly. "Yes, I believe he wanted my father's business for himself. With me gone, there was no one to contest his claim to the partnership." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "The law might have something to say about that. Perhaps, but I have no proof and no means to pursue justice." Beatrice looked down at her hands. "I don't even know how I would get back to Boston or what I would do if I did. What did you do before all this?" "I helped my father with his accounts. I'm good with numbers." She smiled faintly. "I was also expected to play the piano, embroider, and eventually make a suitable marriage, none of which seems particularly useful here." Fletcher chuckled. "You'd be surprised. We're not complete savages in the territory, but your skill with numbers could be valuable." He seemed to be considering something. "The general store in town needs a bookkeeper. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, mentioned it last time I was there. You would trust a complete stranger with such a position." "I'm a good judge of character, Miss Matthews, and despite everything you've been through, I see honesty in your eyes." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "Would you like to see the ranch today? It might help you decide if you want to stay in this area or move on." The tour began with the barn, where Fletcher showed her the horses with obvious pride. There was his chestnut gelding, Thunder, who had carried them both the day before, a sleek black mare named Midnight, and several working horses. In a separate stall, a beautiful palomino whickered softly as they approached. "This is Sunflower," Fletcher said, stroking the horse's nose. "She's gentle as can be. If you decide to stay, she could be yours to ride." Beatrice reached out hesitantly, smiling when the mare nuzzled her palm. "She's lovely." They continued to the cattle pens, where Fletcher explained his breeding program aimed at creating stock better suited to the harsh Montana winters. Then to the bunkhouse where his 5 ranch hands lived, though they were all out working at this hour. "It's not a large operation," he admitted, "but it's growing. I started with just 20 head of cattle and this land 6 years ago." "You've accomplished a great deal," Beatrice said, genuinely impressed. "How did you come to be here?" Fletcher's expression grew distant. "I was a captain in the Union Army during the war. Afterward, I couldn't settle back into city life in Pennsylvania. Too many ghosts." He shook his head as if dispelling unwelcome memories. "I headed west like so many others looking for a fresh start. And did you find it?" His smile returned. "I believe I did." As they walked back toward the house, a wagon appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Fletcher shaded his eyes, then waved. "That's Dr. Benjamin Franklin," he explained. "Despite his illustrious name, he's just our local physician. Comes by once a month to check on Mrs. Parker's arthritis." The doctor was a balding man with spectacles and a friendly demeanor. After seeing to Mrs. Parker, he joined Fletcher and Beatrice for lunch. "So you're the young lady Fletcher rescued," he said, studying her with kind eyes. "Any injuries I should look at?" "That's quite a nasty bruise on your wrist." Beatrice unconsciously touched the mark left by the shackles. "It's nothing serious." "Let me be the judge of that," the doctor insisted, gently examining her wrists. "No infection, that's good. Keep them clean and they'll heal fine." He turned to Fletcher. "Will Miss Matthews be staying with you?" "That's up to her," Fletcher replied. "I mentioned Jenkins needs a bookkeeper." Dr. Franklin nodded approvingly. "That would be ideal. Jenkins is honest and the position comes with a room above the store." Very respectable for a single lady. Beatrice felt a strange pang at the thought of leaving the ranch so soon. "I would need proper clothes and, well, everything." "Mrs. Parker can take you into town tomorrow," Fletcher suggested. "I'll advance you enough for necessities until you receive your first wages." "I couldn't possibly accept more from you," Beatrice protested. Consider it a loan, then. You can repay me when you're settled." Dr. Franklin smiled knowingly between them. "Well, I should be on my way. More patients to see." As he gathered his things, he added casually, "The town dance is Saturday night, Fletcher. You should bring Miss Matthews. Help her meet some of the local folks." After the doctor left, Fletcher looked somewhat embarrassed. "You don't have to attend the dance if you don't want to." "Actually, I think I would like that," Beatrice replied, surprising herself. "It sounds normal." That evening after dinner, Beatrice sat on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Fletcher joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "It's beautiful here," she said softly, "so different from Boston." "Do you miss the city?" She considered the question. "I miss certain things, bookshops, museums, the ocean." She turned to him. "But there's something compelling about this place. It feels real somehow." "That's exactly it," Fletcher agreed. "No pretenses out here, just what a person makes of themselves and the land." They sat in comfortable silence until the stars began to appear. Beatrice had never seen so many, the sky a vast canopy of twinkling lights unobscured by city smoke and gas lamps. "Amazing, isn't it?" Fletcher said, noticing her wonder. "Makes a person feel small. But part of something greater," she added. He smiled at her, their eyes meeting for a long moment before she looked away, suddenly aware of a fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. The next morning, Mrs. Parker announced they would go to town after breakfast. Fletcher brought around the wagon, helping both women up to the seat. "I've written a note for Jenkins," he told Beatrice, "and here's $30 for your necessities." He pressed the money into her hand. "Mrs. Parker knows the best places to shop." The town of Silver Creek was larger than Beatrice had expected, with a main street lined with businesses, a hotel, saloon, general store, dress shop, and various other establishments that served the surrounding ranches and nearby silver mines. Their first stop was the general store, where Mr. Jenkins, a thin man with a friendly manner, was delighted at the prospect of having a bookkeeper. "My ledgers are in a terrible state, Miss Matthews," he confessed. "I'm much better with customers than numbers. Could you start Monday next?" "I would be pleased to," Beatrice replied, finding herself genuinely looking forward to having purposeful work. He showed her the room above the store, small but clean, with its own entrance from a side staircase. "It's yours as part of your wages, $5 a week, plus room and board. I take my meals at the hotel dining room, and you'd be welcome to join me, or you can cook for yourself if you prefer." The terms settled, Mrs. Parker guided Beatrice to the dress shop, where the seamstress took her measurements and promised 2 work dresses by the end of the week. They also found a ready-made dress that could be quickly altered for the dance. "Blue to match your eyes," Mrs. Parker approved. "Fletcher won't be able to look away." Beatrice blushed. "Mrs. Parker, I'm sure Mr. Reed has no such interest in me." The housekeeper just smiled knowingly. "We'll need shoes, too, and some personal items." By the time they returned to the ranch, the wagon was filled with packages, and Beatrice was exhausted but pleased. For the first time since her father's death, she felt she had a future to look forward to. Fletcher was waiting for them, helping unload the purchases. "Successful trip?" "Very," Mrs. Parker answered. "Beatrice starts work on Monday, and she has a perfectly lovely dress for the dance." "I look forward to seeing it," he said, his eyes lingering on Beatrice's face. The next few days passed quickly. Beatrice helped Mrs. Parker with household tasks, learning about ranch life and finding herself increasingly comfortable in this new environment. Fletcher was often busy with ranch work, but they shared meals and evenings on the porch, talking about books they'd read, places they'd seen, and their very different upbringings. "My father wanted a son," Fletcher told her one evening. He was disappointed when I preferred books to hunting as a boy. The war changed that. When I came home a captain, he was finally proud, but by then I couldn't relate to his world anymore. My father was the opposite, Beatrice said. He encouraged my education, even taught me about his business when other merchants' daughters were learning only household management. He sounds like a good man. He was. She swallowed hard. I still can't believe he's gone. Fletcher hesitated, then reached over to take her hand briefly. Grief takes time, don't rush it. His touch was warm and comforting, and Beatrice felt that strange flutter in her chest again. Saturday arrived clear and mild. Mrs. Parker spent the afternoon helping Beatrice prepare for the dance, styling her hair in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck, with a few soft curls framing her face. The blue dress was flattering, though simpler than what Beatrice would have worn to a Boston social event. But when she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized the healthy, sun-kissed young woman who looked back at her. The haunted expression was fading from her eyes, replaced by a cautious hope. Fletcher was waiting at the foot of the stairs when she descended. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You look beautiful," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you." She took in his appearance. He wore a clean white shirt, dark vest and trousers, his usually tousled hair neatly combed. "You look very handsome yourself." Mrs. Parker watched them with a satisfied smile. "You two run along and enjoy yourselves. Don't hurry back on my account." The town hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers. A small band played lively tunes, and the dance floor was already crowded with couples. Beatrice recognized Dr. Franklin and Mr. Jenkins among the attendees, along with many faces she didn't know. Fletcher Reed. A robust woman in a purple dress approached them. "You finally decided to join civilization again. And who's this lovely young lady, Mrs. Whittaker?" "This is Miss Beatrice Matthews. She'll be working for Jenkins starting Monday." "Beatrice, Mrs. Whittaker is our town's unofficial mayor and official busybody." The woman laughed good-naturedly. "Someone has to keep things running smoothly. Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Matthews." "Don't let this one scare you off. He's not nearly as gruff as he pretends to be." As Mrs. Whittaker moved on to greet other arrivals, Fletcher offered Beatrice his arm. "Would you care to dance?" "I'd like that very much." He led her onto the floor just as the band started a waltz. Fletcher's hand was warm at her waist, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a tall man. Beatrice found herself relaxing into the dance, the familiar rhythm bringing back happier memories of society balls in Boston. "You dance very well," she commented. "My mother insisted on lessons. Said no son of hers would clod around a ballroom like a bear." A smile tugged at his lips. "I complained bitterly at the time, but I'm grateful now." As they circled the floor, Beatrice became aware of curious glances from the other dancers. "Everyone is staring at us," she whispered. "They're staring at you," Fletcher corrected. "They've never seen me with such a beautiful partner." The compliment brought color to her cheeks. "I doubt that's true." "It is," he said simply. "I don't socialize much." "Why not?" He shrugged slightly. "Never found a compelling reason to." The way he looked at her then made Beatrice's heart skip. But before she could respond, the music ended and they were approached by Mr. Jenkins. "Miss Matthews, may I have the next dance?" The evening continued pleasantly, with Beatrice being introduced to many of the town's residents. Everyone was welcoming, though she noticed several young women eyeing Fletcher with interest whenever he danced with someone else. During a break in the music, Fletcher brought her a cup of punch. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "Very much. Everyone has been so kind." "Silver Creek is a good community. People look out for each other here. I can see that." She hesitated. Several people have mentioned how unusual it is to see you at a social gathering. Fletcher looked slightly embarrassed. I'm not much for crowds. But I wanted you to meet people, to feel comfortable here. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. His eyes held hers for a long moment. You don't need to thank me, Beatrice. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her breath catch. The band started up again, a livelier tune this time. Fletcher set down their cups. One more dance before we head back. This dance required changing partners, and Beatrice found herself passed from one townsman to another, all friendly and welcoming. But each time she returned to Fletcher's arms, she felt that same strange flutter of excitement. It was late when they finally left the town hall. The night was clear and cool, the road back to the ranch illuminated by a nearly full moon. Fletcher had brought the buggy rather than the wagon, and they sat close together on the narrow seat. "I'll miss the ranch when I move to town," Beatrice said after they had driven in comfortable silence for a while. Fletcher glanced at her. "You're welcome to visit whenever you like, Mrs. Parker would be disappointed if you didn't." "Just Mrs. Parker." The words slipped out before she could stop them. In the moonlight, she saw his smile. "No," he said quietly, "not just Mrs. Parker." The admission hung between them, full of possibility. Beatrice found herself wondering what it would be like to stay at Willow Creek Ranch permanently, to wake each morning to this beautiful landscape and Fletcher's steady presence. But such thoughts were premature. She hardly knew him, and her life had been in turmoil for weeks. Better to establish herself in town first, to find her footing in this new world before considering anything more. Still, as Fletcher helped her down from the buggy at the ranch house, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary, Beatrice couldn't deny the connection growing between them. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said. "The pleasure was mine." He hesitated, then added, "I'll drive you to town on Monday morning. I would appreciate that." They stood for a moment in the moonlight, neither quite ready to end the evening. Then Fletcher gently touched her cheek. "Good night, Beatrice. Sleep well." "Good night, Fletcher." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Beatrice realized she was smiling. Despite everything she had endured, despite the uncertain future, she felt genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. Monday came too quickly. Beatrice packed her new belongings in a trunk Fletcher had found for her, taking a last look around the guest room that had been her safe haven. Mrs. Parker enveloped her in a warm hug. "You come back and see us, you hear? Sunday dinners at the very least." "I promise," Beatrice said, returning the embrace. "Thank you for everything." Fletcher loaded her trunk into the wagon and helped her up to the seat. The morning was bright and promising, but Beatrice felt a strange reluctance as they pulled away from the ranch. "It's not far," Fletcher said, as if reading her thoughts. "And Silver Creek is a good place to start fresh. I know, it's just I've grown fond of the ranch." "It has a way of getting under your skin," he agreed. "The ranch will be here whenever you want to visit." The ride to town was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the general store, Mr. Jenkins came out to help with the trunk. "Welcome, Miss Matthews. I've been organizing the account books all weekend, quite a task, I'm afraid. You've got your work cut out for you." Fletcher carried her trunk up to the room above the store. It looked smaller and plainer than Beatrice remembered, but she smiled brightly when he set the trunk down. "It's perfect. Thank you for bringing me." He stood awkwardly in the small space, hat in his hands. "If you need anything." "I'll be fine," she assured him, "and I'll see you Sunday for dinner as promised." "Sunday," he repeated. "Yes." He seemed about to say something more, then simply nodded. "Good luck with your first day, Beatrice." After he left, she unpacked her few possessions and prepared to begin her new position. Mr. Jenkins was right, the account books were in disarray, but the work was familiar and satisfying. By the end of the day, she had made considerable progress and earned the merchant's enthusiastic praise. The room became more homelike as the week progressed. Mrs. Whittaker brought a small vase of wildflowers to brighten the place up. The seamstress delivered the rest of her new clothes. Dr. Franklin stopped by to check on her health and invited her to borrow books from his personal library anytime. Everyone was kind, but Beatrice found herself watching the road for any sign of Fletcher. He didn't come to town, though she learned he usually made a trip every 2 weeks for supplies. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. When Mr. Jenkins offered his buggy so she could visit the ranch, Beatrice gratefully accepted. She arrived just as Mrs. Parker was setting the table for dinner. "There you are," the housekeeper exclaimed. "Right on time. Fletcher's just washing up." The moment Fletcher entered the kitchen, Beatrice knew something was wrong. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye partially healed. "What happened?" she gasped. "Just a disagreement," he said dismissively. "Nothing to worry about." Mrs. Parker made a disapproving sound. "Tell her the truth, Fletcher Reed. She deserves to know." He sighed, taking a seat at the table. "I rode to Billings on Wednesday, found the man who sold you at the auction, had a discussion with him about his business practices." "A discussion that involved fists," Mrs. Parker added dryly. "You could have been hurt," Beatrice said, distressed. "He looks worse," Fletcher replied with a hint of grim satisfaction. "And he won't be conducting any more auctions for a while. I also spoke with the sheriff there about the legality of his operation." "That was dangerous," Beatrice chided, even as warmth spread through her at the thought that he had done this for her. "Some things are worth the risk." His eyes held hers for a long moment. The meal was delicious roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with Beatrice sharing stories about her first week in town and Fletcher updating her on ranch happenings. After dinner, while Mrs. Parker cleaned up, Fletcher invited Beatrice for a walk. The evening was mild, the setting sun casting long shadows across the pastures. "Are you happy in town?" he asked as they strolled toward the creek. "I'm settling in well," she replied carefully. "The work is satisfying and everyone has been very welcoming." "But are you happy?" Beatrice considered the question. "I'm content." "That seems like a victory, given where I was 2 weeks ago." Fletcher nodded. "You've shown remarkable strength." "I've had remarkable help." She glanced at his profile, strong and steady in the fading light. "I never properly thanked you for what you did that day." "You don't need to." "I do," she interrupted. "You saved me from, I can't even imagine, and you've asked for nothing in return." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Seeing you recover, seeing you smile again, that's more than enough return." The tenderness in his voice made her heart race. "Fletcher, I'm not good with words, Beatrice, but these past 2 weeks, having you at the ranch." He took a deep breath. "I've missed you this week." "I've missed you too," she admitted softly. He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to move away, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "I know it's too soon. You're just starting to find your footing here. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you ever feel the same way, there's a place for you here. Not as a guest, but as—" "As what?" she whispered when he didn't continue, his eyes blue as the Montana sky searched hers. "As whatever you want to be, friend, partner. More." The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Beatrice thought of all she had lost: her father, her home, her entire world, and all she had found in this wild, beautiful place. And this man, steady as the mountains on the horizon, who had saved her without expecting anything in return. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like to find out what more might mean. But you're right, it's too soon. I need time." Relief and hope crossed his face. "Time is something I can give." They walked back to the house as twilight deepened into night, not touching but somehow closer than before. The pattern was established. Beatrice worked at the general store during the week, gradually bringing order to Mr. Jenkins' accounts and even suggesting improvements to his inventory system. On Sundays, she visited the ranch, sometimes staying overnight in her old room to return to town Monday morning. Fletcher came to Silver Creek more frequently, ostensibly for supplies, but always finding time to visit the general store. Sometimes they had lunch together at the hotel dining room, or simply walked along the main street, talking about books or local events or memories of their lives before. June turned to July, and the summer heat settled over the valley. Beatrice found herself flourishing in her new life. She made friends in town, joined the church choir, and even began teaching basic arithmetic to several children whose families lived too far from the schoolhouse to attend regularly. One hot Sunday in late July, Fletcher suggested they ride to a swimming hole on the creek that ran through his property. Beatrice, now comfortable on Sunflower's back, readily agreed. Mrs. Parker packed them a picnic lunch, her knowing smile following them as they rowed out. The swimming hole was perfect, a deep, clear pool beneath a small waterfall, shaded by cottonwood trees. They tied the horses in the shade and spread a blanket on the grassy bank. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said, removing her hat and fanning herself. "Do you come here often?" "When I need to think," Fletcher replied, "or cool off." He grinned suddenly, a boyish expression that transformed his usually serious face, speaking of which. He began unbuttoning his shirt and Beatrice quickly turned away, flustered. "What are you doing, going swimming?" "Don't worry, I'll keep my trousers on, but it's too hot not to take advantage of the water." She heard the splash as he dove in, then his laugh. "Come on, Beatrice, the water's perfect." She turned to see him treading water in the middle of the pool, his hair slicked back, shoulders gleaming wet in the dappled sunlight. The sight made her breath catch. "I didn't bring anything to swim in," she protested. "Your petticoat would work fine. No one's around for miles." It was temptingly improper, yet somehow innocent, too, like children playing on a hot summer day. After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice slipped behind a large tree and removed her dress, leaving on her chemise and petticoat. She emerged self-consciously, arms crossed over her chest. Fletcher had tactfully turned away, giving her privacy to enter the water. She waded in carefully, gasping at the delicious coolness against her skin. "It's wonderful," she called when she was waist deep. He turned then, swimming toward her with strong, sure strokes. "Try floating on your back. Just relax and let the water hold you." With his hand supporting her back, Beatrice leaned backward until she was floating, staring up at the blue sky through green leaves. She felt weightless, free. "I've never done this before," she confessed. Swimming wasn't considered appropriate for young ladies in Boston. "Boston's loss," Fletcher said. His hand remained at the small of her back, a warm point of contact in the cool water. They swam and splashed like children for nearly an hour before hunger drove them back to shore. Fletcher turned his back again while Beatrice changed behind the tree, putting on her dry dress over her damp undergarments, improper but necessary. The picnic lunch was simple but delicious: cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apple tarts. They ate in companionable silence, watching dragonflies dart over the water's surface. "I was thinking," Fletcher said after a while, "about expanding the house." "Oh, more rooms, a proper library for one thing. My books are stacked everywhere, and perhaps a larger kitchen. Mrs. Parker has been asking for years." "It sounds like a good plan," Beatrice said. "Your ranch is thriving." "It is, but a house needs more than books and a good kitchen." He looked at her directly. "It needs a family." Beatrice's heart began to race. "Fletcher, I know we agreed to take time, and I'll wait as long as you need, but I want you to know that my feelings haven't changed." He reached for her hand. "In fact, they've only grown stronger." She looked down at their joined hands, as large and tanned, calloused from ranch work. Her smaller, paler, but no longer as soft as they had been in Boston. Working at the store, riding Sunflower, helping Mrs. Parker with bread, making all had left their marks. "Mine too," she said softly. His eyes brightened. "Really?" "Yes." She squeezed his hand. "But I'm still finding my way here, and there's something I need to do before I can truly move forward." "What is that?" "I need to write to the authorities in Boston about Mr. Hargrove, my father's partner. What he did to me was criminal, and I suspect his business dealings weren't honest either." Fletcher nodded. "I'll help in any way I can." "I know." She smiled at him. "That's one of the many reasons I'm falling in love with you." The words slipped out naturally without planning, but Beatrice didn't regret them. They were true. Fletcher's expression softened. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm already in love with you, Beatrice Matthews. Have been since that first night on the porch, watching the stars come out." The moment stretched between them, sweet and full of promise. Then Fletcher released her hand and began packing up the remains of their picnic. "We should head back before Mrs. Parker sends out a search party," he said with a smile. As they rode back to the ranch side by side, Beatrice felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. The letter to Boston was sent the following week with Dr. Franklin's help in contacting the proper authorities. Weeks passed with no response, and Beatrice tried not to let disappointment dampen her growing happiness in Silver Creek. Fletcher continued his courtship with quiet persistence. Flowers appeared on the counter at the general store. Books from his collection were lent with thoughtful notes about passages he thought she'd enjoy. On Sundays, they rode together, exploring the ranch and surrounding countryside, growing closer with each shared experience. In early September, just as the aspens were beginning to turn gold, a letter arrived from Boston. Beatrice's hands trembled as she opened it in her room above the store. The contents were better than she could have hoped. Mr. Hargrove had been arrested on multiple charges of fraud and kidnapping. The investigation had revealed he had done the same to other heirs and heiresses whose fortunes he coveted. Most surprisingly, while her father's business had indeed suffered losses, it wasn't bankrupt as Hargrove had claimed. There was a modest estate that rightfully belonged to Beatrice. The letter concluded by requesting she return to Boston to testify against Hargrove and settle her father's affairs. Beatrice sat for a long time, staring at the letter. Return to Boston. Just weeks ago, she would have given anything for this opportunity. Now, it filled her with conflicting emotions. She waited until Sunday to share the news with Fletcher. They were walking along the creek after dinner, the evening air crisp with the promise of autumn. "That's wonderful news," he said when she told him about Hargrove's arrest. "You must be relieved." "I am," she agreed, "but they want me to go back to Boston." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "When would you leave?" The letter suggests as soon as possible. "The trial is scheduled for next month." She looked up at him, trying to read his expression in the fading light. "I have to go, Fletcher. Not just for justice, but to say a proper goodbye to my father and the life I had there." "I understand," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "How long will you be gone?" "The letter says to expect at least 2 months for the trial and settling the estate." She took a deep breath. "But I want you to know I'm coming back." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Are you certain Boston is your home? Your father's business, your inheritance?" "Silver Creek is my home now," she interrupted firmly. "You are my home." The inheritance means I can return on my own terms with resources to contribute to our future. If that's still what you want." Fletcher cupped her face in his hands. "It's all I want, Beatrice. You here, building a life together." Under the vast Montana sky, with the mountains turning purple in the distance, he kissed her for the first time. It was gentle at first, then deepening as Beatrice responded, her arms sliding around his waist. When they finally parted, both breathless, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I'll wait for you, however long it takes. 2 months, she promised. Not a day longer. The journey east was long but uneventful. Dr. Franklin accompanied Beatrice as far as Cheyenne, where she connected with the Transcontinental Railroad. Fletcher had wanted to take her himself, but the fall cattle drive required his presence at the ranch. Boston was both familiar and strange. The city seemed smaller somehow, more confining after the vast spaces of Montana. Beatrice stayed with her father's sister, Aunt Margaret, a kindly widow who welcomed her with open arms and endless questions about her adventures in the West. The trial proceeded quickly. Mr. Hargrove, faced with overwhelming evidence and testimony from multiple victims, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Beatrice's testimony was brief but powerful, and she felt a weight lift as justice was served. Settling her father's estate took longer. There were accounts to review, property to sell, legal documents to sign. The final sum was modest by Boston standards, about $3,000, but represented freedom and opportunity to Beatrice. Throughout her time in Boston, she wrote to Fletcher weekly, long letters describing her days and reaffirming her commitment to return. His replies were shorter but no less heartfelt, each one ending with "I love you" and "I'm waiting." As November turned cold and gray in Boston, Beatrice finalized her affairs. Several former acquaintances had hinted at potential suitors now that her financial situation was secure, but Beatrice politely declined all introductions. Her heart was in Montana with a man who had saved her in more ways than one. "Are you certain about this?" Aunt Margaret asked as she helped Beatrice pack. "Montana is so uncivilized, and winter there must be brutal." "I've never been more certain of anything," Beatrice replied. "Fletcher is a good man, Aunt Margaret. I wish you could meet him." "Perhaps I will someday." The older woman sighed. "Your father would want you to be happy, dear. If this rancher makes you happy, then go with my blessing." The return journey seemed twice as long as the outbound trip had been. Beatrice watched impatiently as the landscape changed from the ordered farms of the East to the rolling plains of the Midwest, and finally to the rugged mountains of Montana. She hadn't told Fletcher exactly when she would arrive, wanting to surprise him. It was early December when the stagecoach finally pulled into Silver Creek, the town festooned with pine boughs and red ribbons for the coming Christmas season. Mr. Jenkins was the first to spot her. "Miss Matthews, you're back," word spread quickly. By the time Beatrice had retrieved her trunk from the stage, a small crowd had gathered to welcome her. Dr. Franklin insisted on driving her to the ranch immediately, despite the snow that had begun to fall. "Fletcher's been like a bear with a thorn in his paw since you left," the doctor told her as they drove. "Mrs. Parker says he checks the road a dozen times a day." Beatrice's heart swelled at the thought. "I've missed him terribly." "The feeling is clearly mutual," the doctor chuckled. "The whole town has been taking bets on when you two will announce a wedding date." Willow Creek Ranch looked like a scene from a Christmas card, the buildings outlined in snow, smoke curling from the chimney of the main house. As they approached, the front door opened and Fletcher emerged, clearly having heard the wagon. He stood motionless as Beatrice descended from the buggy, snow falling around them like lace. Then he was moving, striding toward her with purpose, and she was running to meet him. They collided in a fierce embrace, Fletcher lifting her off her feet and spinning her once before setting her down. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're really here. I promised I would be." She reached up to touch his face, brushing away snowflakes or perhaps tears from his cheeks. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, heedless of Dr. Franklin's presence or the cold or anything except the woman in his arms. "Welcome home," he whispered against her lips. "Home," she agreed, and the word had never held such meaning. Mrs. Parker appeared at the door, her exclamation of joy breaking the moment. Fletcher kept his arm around Beatrice as they walked to the house, unwilling to lose contact even for a moment. That evening, after a celebratory dinner with Mrs. Parker and Dr. Franklin, Fletcher and Beatrice sat before the fire in the parlor. He held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm as if reassuring himself she was really there. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting." He withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the firelight. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My mother sent it when I wrote to her about you." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful." "Beatrice Matthews," Fletcher said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner, build a life with me here." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her hand, her wrist, her lips. "I should warn you," Beatrice said when they parted. "I come with a dowry now, $3,000 to be exact." Fletcher raised an eyebrow. "That's a considerable sum." "I thought perhaps we could use it for those house expansions you mentioned, the library and kitchen, and perhaps—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "a nursery." His eyes darkened with emotion. "A nursery would be a fine addition." "Not right away," she clarified, "but someday. When we're ready." "Someday," he agreed, pulling her close again. "We have all the time in the world now." They were married on Christmas Eve in the Silver Creek Church, decorated with evergreens and candles. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with ranchers from miles around. Beatrice wore a gown of ivory satin ordered from Denver, with Mrs. Parker's lace veil. Fletcher looked handsome in a new black suit, his expression solemn until the moment he saw his bride walking toward him, when his face transformed with joy. Dr. Franklin performed the ceremony, his words about love and partnership bringing tears to many eyes. When Fletcher and Beatrice exchanged vows, their voices were clear and certain, their promises made not just for the good times but for whatever challenges might come. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Dr. Franklin concluded. "Fletcher, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was brief but tender, a promise of more to come when they were alone. The cheers and applause that followed reflected the community's genuine happiness for the couple who had found each other against such unlikely odds. The celebration continued at the town hall, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. As the evening wore on, Fletcher drew Beatrice outside for a moment of quiet beneath the stars. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his coat around both of them against the cold. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed her temple. "I keep thinking of that day at the auction, if I had arrived 10 minutes later." "But you didn't," she reminded him. "You were there exactly when I needed you most. And I always will be," he promised, "for as long as I live." They stood for a moment in the clear, cold night, the sounds of celebration muted behind them, the future stretching before them like the vast Montana sky full of possibilities, challenges, and adventures they would face together. Then Fletcher took his wife's hand and led her back inside to dance, both knowing that the greatest adventure of all had already begun. Spring came early to Montana that year. By March, the snow was melting, revealing tender green shoots and the first wildflowers. At Willow Creek Ranch, the changes were not just in the landscape, but in the main house as well. The promised expansions were underway, the kitchen now twice its original size, with new shelves and a larger stove that delighted Mrs. Parker. The library was taking shape in what had once been a rarely used formal parlor, with built-in bookshelves designed to Fletcher's specifications. But the most significant change was in the master bedroom, where Beatrice stood before the mirror, hands resting on the slight swell of her abdomen. 4 months married, and already their family was growing. The doctor had confirmed her suspicions the previous week, estimating the baby would arrive in late summer. Fletcher appeared in the doorway behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. His arms encircled her waist, hands covering hers protectively. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Better. The sickness seems to be passing." She leaned back against his chest. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year." "All for the better," he said, "though I still can't believe how lucky I am." Beatrice turned in his arms to face him. "Not luck, fate perhaps, or divine intervention. Whatever it was, I'm grateful." He kissed her softly. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to have." As they walked downstairs together, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the loss and fear, but also the courage and hope that had led to this moment. From the auction block to becoming mistress of Willow Creek Ranch, wife to a man who treasured her, mother to be of a child already deeply loved. Outside, the Montana spring was bringing new life to the land. Inside, in the home they were building together, the promise of that new life was mirrored in the family they had become and the future they would create, one day, one season, 1 year at a time. "Don't cry," Fletcher had said on that fateful day almost a year ago. "You're safe now," and she was. Safe, loved, and finally home.